I'm now going to be creating plugins for this project. As we generate tools for the project, we may want to make these tools more flexible and do things which go beyond standard HDA interactions, like using Python panels and custom viewer states. These can be stored locally and they can work within the HDA, but they are often more flexible if you store them remotely as part of a plugin, so that they're not necessarily tied in with single instances of nodes. These can also be used as nodeless plugins, as many viewer states do not actually need to be linked to a specific node, and they can be given far more general functionality. I will also want to make pipeline tools. I would prefer to mainly go editorless. In other words, I want to do most of the level editing within Houdini, and I do not want to have to worry about a specific game engine for the implementation. I could do this entirely through plugin architecture, so you could have something like Santa Monica Studios, where they do not actually have an editor, and the entire game is built within Maya. And I could do the same thing with Houdini, and it's actually almost easier to do this with Houdini because of Houdini Engine. But there is a major problem with this, in that I do not want to tie myself to a specific application at any point. And this is a problem which has been stated by Santa Monica Studios themselves. So I am going to consider more flexible options, like using USD as the main scene format, and then building a pipeline around that. So I'm going to set up my plugins within Houdini, and this will be done within the user preferences directory. I'm going to add a folder here for my plugins. I'm going to name this SH Game Tools. I'll then enter the folder and I'm going to copy the path for the folder. I'm then going to return to my user preferences directory, and there'll usually be a packages folder here. However, this is not always the case. On a brand new installation, there are often no extra folders within the user preferences directory, and you may have to add this folder manually. I'll enter this folder and I'll create a new text file. I'll call this SH Game Tools as well. The naming is not important here, but it is far easier to tell what is going on if you have shared naming. The extension for this file should be JSON. I can then edit this file. This can be done in any text editor, but I'm using Visual Studio Code. I also have the Houdini helper open. You can look under the Houdini packages option here for more information on packages. However, in this case, what I really want is not the packages, but the list of environment variables. And this is one of the quickest ways to get to the environment variables. I can now edit the JSON file, and essentially this is going to be a list of environment variables. We'll start with a pair of curly braces, and between these I'm going to specify an environment variable. This will be a string env, which will be followed by a colon. This will then contain a list, which will be between square braces. As this is a string, it should be between quotation marks. I'll then specify my first environment variable, and this will be specified between curly braces. The environment variable that we go to create will be a string, and this is going to be the name for the plugin itself. The name of this environment variable will be SH Game Tools. This will be followed by a colon, and then we'll set the value for this. The environment variable is going to be a path, and the path will be a string as well. For this string, I'm not going to use the entire path. I'm actually going to build the path using an environment variable. To do this, we'll need to start the string with an environment variable, and in order for this to be read as an environment variable, the string will begin with a $sign. I can then paste my plugin path, and the problem with this plugin path is it is currently specific to this hard drive. So if I need to move this plugin somewhere else, I'll need to update the plugin itself, and this is not an ideal situation. However, in this case, we only need the final directory for the plugin. The rest of this path is already specified within an existing environment variable. So I'll delete everything except the final plugin directory. And then the Houdini environment variable that I'm looking for is user preferences directory. So I'll use this as the start of my path, and this will be followed by my plugin directory. That will give me a reference to my base plugin. Next, I want this plugin to be recognized as a Python directory, and this is so we can use Python scripts from within this folder. For this, I'm going to use an environment variable which is not part of Houdini, but is actually a more universal environment variable. And this will be the Python path environment variable. This will once again be set with a string. And I'm going to set this with an environment variable, and that environment variable is going to be the one which I have just created, which will be the environment variable for my plugin. And this is SH Game Tools. Once again, this should be preceded by a $sign. I'm now going to add environment variables which are a bit more specialized, and there will be a number of these. The first will specify a folder where we will search for HDAs, and these HDAs will be available to our Houdini installation on startup, so we will not need to import these. The environment variable for this is actually reasonably obscure, and this is because it's based off deprecated terminology. This naming is based off OTLs. Generally, OTLs will no longer be used, as they have been superseded by HDAs, but the environment variable for scanning HDAs is still specified with the OTL terminology. The default storage for HDAs is also an OTL directory, which is placed within the user preferences directory. So the environment variable we're going to use here is Houdini OTL scan path. This path is going to be based off my plugin path, so it will start with $sh game tools, and then I'm going to add a folder within this which is going to be HDA. I'll duplicate this line a few times, as we are going to use this basic structure for a number of environment variables. After the HDAs, I'm going to specify radial menus. The environment variable here will be Houdini radial menu path. I will also want to be able to use custom icons. This is not necessarily something which I'm going to do, as it does take time to make custom icons, but I do want the ability to do that, and if I do this now, I will not have to implement this later. More important than icons and radial menus will be Python panels, as these allow for far more flexible interfaces, and the environment variable for these is Houdini Python panel path. The final environment variable that I'm going to add at the moment will be a path for custom viewer states. These are similar to Python panels in that they allow for a lot of extra functionality within Houdini, and the environment variable for these will be Houdini viewer state path. I'll then update the folders which each of these will reference. We'll have the HDA folder, I'll have the radial menu folder, I'll have an icons folder, as well as a Python panels folder, and finally I'll have the viewer states folder. I'll then clean up the names and formatting. I'll also need to make sure that the last entry is not followed by a comma. The structure for the plugin should be set up, although I haven't actually created the folders yet. I'll navigate to my Game Tools folder, and I'll add the folders here. The first will be HDA. I'll need a radial menus folder, as well as an icons folder. There'll be a Python panels folder as well, and we'll also have the viewer states folder. I'm then going to add two plugin folders. These are not specified as part of the plugin, as these will mainly contain scripts. Because of this, these will be registered under the Python path, and they do not actually need to be registered within the plugin. The first of these will be shunity. This will contain scripts which are specific for Unity. The second will be shfrimble. This is a test game engine which I'm working on. It may well never amount to anything, but it is part of this project, so I will integrate any tools which I use for it within this plugin. My plugin structure should now be set up, and this means I can return to Houdini to check if this is working. To see if the plugin has been registered, I'm going to open a pane tab. The tab that I'm looking for is under Inspectors, and this is the package browser. This will have a list of all of the packages which are registered within Houdini. I should now have SH Game Tools listed here. I can expand this package, and what I want to examine here is the list of environment variables. I should have my OTL scan path, and I can examine the folder, and this is correct. The same applies for my Python panels, as well as my radial menus. The other environment variables are also correct. So I now have my plugin structure set up, and I can now use this to construct more complex tools for the prototype, and this is something which I'll be doing throughout the project.